Welcome and very good morning to all of you. We are starting the webinar now. My name is Ajay, representing Path Infotech, and would be moderating this webinar. Path Infotech is an Oracle partner over 3 decades of experience. We have helped multiple clients on MySQL implementation and services. Today, I would like to welcome all of you to this knowledge session on MySQL HeatWave on public clouds like OCI, AWS, and Azure. In our previous session, we covered the overview of MySQL HeatWave, including Apex on MySQL. We will share the recording of the webinar with all of you. In this knowledge session, we will explore more on MySQL HeatWave public clouds availability and features. Next slide, please. Some housekeeping rules. Your line will remain muted during the session. If you have any question during the presentation, please type them into a question box in your control panel. The Q&A round will be at the end of the session, and we will address your queries at that time. This session is getting recorded, and link would be shared with all the participants post the webinar. Next slide, please. Now, coming to the speaker side, we have Perside Foster, the MySQL Principal Partner Solution Engineer at Oracle. A little bit about Perside. She is responsible for driving and development adoption of MySQL HeatWave across the globe. Perside works with Oracle sales team and other solutions engineer to help develop and deliver the finest solution based on MySQL HeatWave offerings. Hi Perside, welcome to the session.
Hello, I'm glad you guys took some time out to spend the next hour with me and the rest of the Infotech team. Today, we will focus on MySQL HeatWave in the multi-cloud. We'll start by covering HeatWave on OCI, HeatWave on Azure, and HeatWave on AWS. We'll also talk about HeatWave customer success, how a customer went from another cloud and moved to HeatWave, and we'll tell you their story. And we'll finish up by doing a demo of MySQL HeatWave on AWS, more like a walkthrough to show you how it really looks and some of its capabilities. And then we'll open up for question and answering. Okay, let's go ahead and start. I'll talk about MySQL HeatWave, its original beginning in OCI. First, let's talk about businesses. Businesses today want to get information in real time so that they can make the best decision. But you know, this is not always possible because they need to wait, because they end up making decisions based on old data because they're waiting. As a result, they miss fast-moving trends, and more importantly, they lose the opportunity to meet their customers' needs, and sometimes they even lose sales. The reason why businesses are experiencing such difficulties is because they are being forced to move all their data from transactional database to an analytical database. So by the time the data is available for analysis on a separate database, it is old. This is why MySQL HeatWave was created. It was to help solve this problem. It is the only cloud database service that combines online transaction processing, which we call OLTP, online analytic processing, OLAP, and machine learning, which is very popular these days. And all of this is done in one MySQL database. And it's delivered in real time, it is secure, and there's no complexity of moving data from one database to another. And it costs a lot less. Here's the other news. It is available on other clouds. So let's talk about OLTP. Usually, businesses have 2 types capabilities, OLTP and OLAP. And today, it's even more important for them to include machine learning. But let's talk about online transaction processing for a minute. Online transaction processing enables the real-time execution of large numbers of transactions by many people. For example, online transaction processing could be banking, shopping, order entry, and sometimes text messaging. So what happens is these transactions are recorded and they are secured so that the company can access the information anytime for accounting, reporting, or whatever. Online analytical processing, on the other hand, usually involves querying the OLTP transaction that was created in the database for analytical purpose. OLAP helps companies extract insight from the OLTP data that they created earlier so that they can make informed decisions with analytics and with machine learning. MySQL is optimized for OLTP, but it was not designed for analytic processing. To run analytics before MySQL HeatWave, companies had to use extract, transform, and load processing. We call it ETL, and use this process to move data from OLTP to OLAP. So, for example, you would move it to an analytic database service like Redshift. This activity introduced some problems. For example, you needed a developer to write the code for the ETL and make sure that the right data is selected to be exported into the analytic database. And as a result, because data is traveling over the network from one place to another, you have to worry about latency. You also have to worry about the problem of security. And on top of that, you end up paying for 2 databases or more instead of just one. And here's the other part. Your data, by the time it gets to the analytics database, it is old. It is not in sync with the OLTP data. This is why, again, Oracle created MySQL HeatWave, which is very similar to how the Oracle database works. MySQL HeatWave is the only service that enables developers and database administrators to run OLTP and OLAP workloads directly from the MySQL database. Again, I said no need for ETL because the data is in one database. And you get real-time analytics. So because the data is not traveling to some other place, and because the data is automatically put into the HeatWave cluster, your data is always the same. And then here's the best part. You do not have to change any of your application because MySQL HeatWave is a native MySQL solution. So your current application will run without any problem. And then whatever tool, if you are using Tableau or Oracle Analytics, whatever BI tool you're using, they will keep working with HeatWave, MySQL HeatWave. So now the other part is that because so many people want to use MySQL HeatWave, but they cannot leave their current cloud, Oracle has made MySQL HeatWave available on Azure and on AWS. So let's talk about this popular machine learning that I'm sure if you're in the news, you hear so many things about how important machine learning and AI is these days. Well, guess what? With HeatWave, you too can do machine learning because in HeatWave, AutoML is included. Users now can build, train, deploy, and explain machine learning models inside MySQL at no cost. It comes as part of MySQL. You don't need a separate machine learning service like TensorFlow and so on to create your machine learning model. And also, you don't need to learn all of the skills of the data analysts would use, or experts, machine learning experts would use to build your machine learning model. With just plain old MySQL, you can use HeatWave AutoML. And also now we've added user interface. In other words, we've created so that you don't even have to use the SQL statement. You can just drag and drop, select your data, tell him what kind of model you want to create. It will create your model. You'll be able to ask questions. And when it does give you the answer, it also explains how it got this answer for you. Next time we meet, we will go into more detail as to how machine learning works. We'll talk about how it works on Azure and how it works on AWS. But for now, you can do machine learning, have your models available with your own data and be able to ask and check with your machine learning data. Now, to understand why MySQL HeatWave can process OLTP, OLAP, and machine learning in one database, let's look at the architecture. A HeatWave cluster consists of a MySQL database system and HeatWave nodes. The MySQL database system includes a HeatWave plugin that is responsible for cluster management. And it also does query scheduling, and it's also responsible for returning the query results to the MySQL database system. The HeatWave nodes store data in memory and processes analytics and machine learning queries. So each HeatWave node hosts an instance of the HeatWave query processing engine. The number of nodes that is required depends on the data size. A single HeatWave cluster can go way up high, more than 64 nodes, and is capable of handling more than 50 terabytes of data. When you enable HeatWave cluster, the analytic queries are processed this way. Example, your application sends a HeatWave, a MySQL query. The plugin checks to see if MySQL HeatWave cluster is enabled. If the cluster is enabled, it takes a quick check of how fast the query will take to execute the query. If it's a very, if it's like a fast query, it can be executed in no time, then the execution takes place in the MySQL InnoDB. In other words, MySQL DB. Now, if this query is going to take a long time, what it does is it lets the MySQL HeatWave cluster query accelerator take care of it. So for example, if you have a query with lots of aggregations, sum, average, and multiple tables and over 1 million records, then the plugin sends that query over to the HeatWave cluster. Now here's the deal, let's remember this. While the cluster is working and it comes back with the answer really quick, however, let's say your online application is running and it needs to process a very short and quick query. Well, the plugin manages that too. It works so that your OLTP transaction is quickly processed and also that your OLAP transaction is also being taken care of. This is why we said that it handles the scheduling. So this is why MySQL HeatWave works based on this architecture. Another thing I want to say about the architecture, when you load your data into the HeatWave nodes, the cluster, what happens is the MySQL HeatWave takes that data and stores it in object storage. So every time the data is updated, it's stored in object storage too. That's a backup. Why? In case something happens to one of the nodes. If there's a problem with one of the nodes, MySQL HeatWave quietly replaces that node with the data that is stored in object storage, and everything is fine. You don't even notice it. Now, to do all these wonderful activities, functions quietly in the background, we use something called MySQL Autopilot. Let's talk about MySQL. Let's talk about database deployment. That in itself is hard. And then tuning the database. As a database administrator, it's a never-ending process. It can consume a lot of time and can also be very frustrating. MySQL Autopilot solves this problem. It combines deep analytics and finely tuned machine learning models to drive a continually optimized and always resilient MySQL database environment. MySQL Autopilot uses auto provisioning to predict the number of HeatWave nodes that is needed for a workload based on how large your data is. So like say you have a 6 terabyte amount of data in your MySQL database, and you do want to do machine learning, you want to do analytics, you turn on your query, your HeatWave cluster, you are not sure how many nodes you need. You would use MySQL Autopilot to help you. We have it, it's a UI. You go in, you say, here, my data is in your database. Tell me how many nodes I need in order to create this cluster. And it does that for you. Another thing that MySQL Autopilot does is it helps you speed your queries. It gives you advice. It says, well, you know what? If you did this, your query will run faster. And the reason it's able to do that is it uses machine learning again. It pays attention to all of the queries that are running inside the MySQL system. And based on that, it learns how to make the next query even better. And then there's thread pooling. Thread pooling helps the performance of your database. Well, MySQL Autopilot has thread pooling to do that for you. You don't have to set it up. You don't have to worry about it. And then one more thing. It also tells you how to improve your shape. If your shape is very large, you're not using it to the best of its capacity, it will tell you, hey, you can get a lower shape. That will help you save money. That is MySQL Autopilot in a nutshell. Now, let's talk about price. You have all of these functionalities. You can do so much stuff that you could not do in other clouds without having multiple database and headaches. What's the cost? Well, MySQL HeatWave is faster and less expensive than any cloud database. And we are saying this because we did some benchmarking with TPCH, TPCDS, and other benchmarking. And what we noticed is that Snowflake, Amazon, Redshift, Google, BigQuery, and all of those, they are especially Snowflake, it is 6.8 times slower and is 5 times more expensive than MySQL HeatWave. Google BigQuery is 9 times slower and 4 times more expensive. Now, let's talk about Amazon Aurora. 1,400 times slower and 2 times more expensive. So using MySQL HeatWave on OCI is a great investment for a company. But, you know, because the cloud has fundamentally changed the way organizations do development, secure their data, and manage infrastructure, the ability to quickly provision stuff and innovate has changed the way that OCIs spend the money for IT. According to IDC, in 2022, more money was spent in the cloud than on-premise. Now, as usage of the cloud increases, companies are finding it hard to just stick in one cloud. They kind of need multi-cloud environment. And the reason they need multi-cloud environment is because some providers don't offer everything they need, or the cost is way too high. Now, for example, multi-cloud computing, the multi-cloud computing that I'm talking about is the computing that uses the best services from more than one cloud provider to deploy the needed solution. And according to Gartner, S&P, and IDC, most companies want to choose the best cloud for each of their important workloads. And they want their cloud providers to help them achieve this goal. OCI infrastructure lets you combine cloud services from multiple clouds to optimize cost, functionality, and performance. Now, some clouds make it very hard for you to use multi-cloud because they have a financial reason for that. Oracle, on the other hand, builds bridges, not walls, when it comes to doing multi-cloud with OCI. This is why Oracle has taken it upon itself to put MySQL HeatWave on AWS and Azure. Let me show you how it's done. Let's talk about Azure first. If you look inside the data center of most enterprises, you'll likely find 2 familiar brands of application, Oracle and MySQL and Microsoft. The CIOs, they got together to plan a migration cloud, which gives you the ability to move applications and databases without compromising performance and the availability of the application that you're working with and the data. Oracle and MySQL have partners to create Oracle Database Service for Azure. It is an Oracle managed intercloud service that enables customers to easily provision and manage MySQL HeatWave running on OCI using an Azure native API and console experience. The reason that they did that is to solve the most common challenges of multi-cloud. By creating an automated and seamless experience, Oracle recognized that Azure customers are not familiar with OCI, and they don't have time to learn our terminology and our processes. So it created a portal that looked familiar to Azure users. With MySQL HeatWave service for Azure, customers can use MySQL HeatWave running on OCI, like I said, as if it was running on Azure. the user connects to Azure through subscription, through their to a subscription to their own OCI tenancy in just a few minutes. The service establishes a link between the two clouds. Azure users can seamlessly provision and use the service by just a click. They can run their application in Azure and use MySQL HeatWave with no extra charge for ingress or egress. Also, OSDA sends metrics, logs, and events to the OCI database that you create. It uses the Azure tooling to do that. In addition, the service also simplifies customer support. They've got something called a collaborative support model. And what this collaborative support model does is offer a seamless issue resolution process. In other words, if you have a problem with MySQL HeatWave, you can submit a ticket either through the MySQL HeatWave side or through Azure. And both of them will work together to help you solve this problem. Now, we did a recent comparison using TPCH for 10 bytes of data. And what we learned is that MySQL HeatWave performance was significantly better than the performance of Azure. In other words, MySQL HeatWave for Azure worked much better and much faster than Azure on the Microsoft Cloud side. To make it more realistic, one of our large retail customers that used to use Azure, MySQL Azure from the Microsoft Cloud, migrated to MySQL HeatWave for Azure. And they told us that MySQL HeatWave is 2 times faster at half the cost of the Azure MySQL offering. I don't need to say more. So let's talk about AWS. Oracle embraced the notion of multi-cloud by first releasing MySQL HeatWave on AWS. That means the entire MySQL HeatWave environment, core capabilities, autopilot, and ML is available for customers to use on AWS. Oracle did this to bring the value of MySQL HeatWave to customers that are already stuck on AWS. In the past, AWS customers who wanted to use MySQL HeatWave would have to move all of their data from AWS into OCI. That's a big problem because Amazon charges a lot of money to move data out of AWS. So rather than force companies to make this difficult decision, Oracle created MySQL HeatWave. It runs natively on AWS. Customers can access the database with very low latency and not pay any data egress fees. Just like OCI, MySQL HeatWave for AWS is fully managed for provisioning database, for patching, upgrade, and backing it up. No need for ETL, and you get the best price performance. When you sign up for MySQL HeatWave on AWS, you're directed to OCI, where you must sign up for an Oracle Cloud account. If you don't have one, you go ahead and you sign up. After you sign up, you're directed to the OCI console to complete the sign up process. When the sign up process is done, you are able to create your HeatWave database because we take you to a HeatWave console. And there you create your database. Once you create your database, you get to tell it which region, and normally and most likely you put it on the same region where your AWS account is. Once you do that, you also get to select your backup frequency, how long you want to keep it, and so on. And another big piece is because Oracle is so gung-ho about security, you get to tell it exactly which IP addresses are allowed to access the database. If the IP address is not part of this configuration, no matter what you do, you will not be able to access the database. So now, with that, when I do my demo, I'll tell you more about AWS and MySQL HeatWave. But let's talk about price. Remember, HeatWave works much faster than AWS. Outside of the AWS, in other words, if you have an RDS or Aurora or Redshift database, HeatWave works much faster. And on top of that, the price is so much lower. MySQL HeatWave is 6.8 times faster than Amazon Redshift. And that's MySQL HeatWave on AWS. And then there's MySQL HeatWave price. It is half the cost of Amazon Redshift. So let me wrap things up by telling you a story. First of all, a lot of fast-growing cloud-native organizations select MySQL HeatWave as their data platform to effectively overcome their growing pains. One of these cloud-native startups is Bio9. Bio9 has a vision. It is to provide diabetes patients with peace of mind through self-monitoring blood glucose system that helps them accurately manage and control their health. That's a good vision. Now, this medical device manufactures analytics service on RDS. It was built on RDS. However, it was not performing well for the large amount of data that is needed to provide the type of information that the patients needed. So Bio9 looked for a faster data platform that would support its existing database technologies. And that's why they use MySQL HeatWave on AWS. Bio9 has seen 50 times faster speed on HeatWave on AWS than it was on RDS. MySQL improved the scalability and also gave them the ability to not worry about creating ETL to get their data to Redshift from RDS. And also they save money, and here is the best part, their data was accurate. The data was up to the minute accurate when it came to providing the analysis that's needed for those patients. MySQL is now helping Bio9 launch its next generation product, which is continuous glucose monitoring with more accurate real-time reporting to improve patients' lives. I guess I've told you all that I can about MySQL HeatWave in the multi-cloud. I do want to bring up one more thing. In case you cannot move to any cloud, guess what? Oracle make it possible for you to have HeatWave on your data center. That's another topic. We'll talk about it some other time. Now it's time to do our demo. So give me a few minutes while I set up my demo. Hold on. Okay. Now, what I want to tell you is, to do this demo, I created two systems. I created the AWS system, and in my AWS system, I have an EC2. I gotta move this out of here because something is in my way. Hold on for a minute. I have an EC2 compute instance, in other words, an EC2 server that has an application that's connected to RDS, which is an RDS database. Now, what I'm going to show you is I'm going to log in to this instance, this AWS instance, and I'm going to show you what I have in there. Let's see. It's coming, okay. I'm using SSH to connect to the server, the EC2 server. Now that I have the server, what I want to do is I'm going to use MySQL shell to look at the RDS database. Let's make my screen a little bit bigger while I wait. Oh, wow. Okay, it's back. Now that I am inside RDS, I don't want to use JSON. I want to use SQL because I want to run a couple of SQL statements. So here, now that I have SQL on, the first thing I want to do here, let me get my notes so that I can just do a cut and paste instead of typing everything wrong. So here, I'm going to go in. Okay, here's my note. First thing I want to do is I want to do a show database. Show database, what it's going to do is going to tell me all of the schemas that I have available in what first, what I have to do. Okay, let's see. Show databases. Okay, these are all the databases that I have available in my system. I have two major schemas, I guess. I have a sample one and I have an airport. Let's go ahead and use the airport DB because that's the one we're going to be looking at when we go to MySQL HeatWave. So I'm using airport DB. Let's take a look and see all the tables that are inside airport DB. Oh, have a lot of them. Well, you know what? Let's do a select. Let's give it a chance to prove itself. We're going to do a select on a very small table, which is the airline table. Look at this. There's 118 airlines. It took like 0.0068 seconds. Came back really quick. Wonderful. Now this airport DB has a lot of data, and also it has a lot of tables. And to be honest with you, I want to see how it behaves when I give him a much more complicated query. Let's put this query in. Okay. Well, I tried it earlier. It's going to take a while. So let's let it run. We'll come back and visit it. And when we come back to do the visiting, we will see how long it really took. So let's go ahead and go into MySQL HeatWave on AWS. As I said before, if you don't have an account on OCI, you create one. Once you create your account on OCI, it comes back and it gives you your tenancy name. In my case, it's HeatWave Demo. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and log into my HeatWave Demo with my user information. So I hit continue. And I put in my user ID and I go ahead and also put in my password. Okay, it's here. There. When you log in, you get a very nice, friendly screen that tells you what to do. It also gives you more details about MySQL and HeatWave. Now, you have the option, well, that's probably the only option you have, is to create a database. To create the database, you give it the information you need, like I told you. You select which shape you want. You go ahead and set up your backup and so on. And this is also where you go ahead and put in the IP address of the compute instances or the systems that will be using it. I've already created a database, so let me show you. I created this one. Here, let's take a look and see what it has. Let's take a look at the details of this database. Here, to do that, I'm just gonna, oh, by the way, when you select here, you have many options. You can edit your database, you can update the networking. Update networking is where you go in and you put in the IP address of the system you want to use. So for example, when I created it, if I had put just one and I have another system that I want to use, I would come in here and put the IP address there. You can create backups and so many things. But let's click on it. Here, these are all the details of what was done to create the database. This is your database and everything you need. The most important thing you need right now is the host name. So now what you do is to look at it. Let's take a look. I have HeatWave clusters but to work with the system, what you do is you have a workspace. We've created a workspace. And to work on the workspace, you select your database, you put your administration, and then you put your password. Let's connect. Once you connect, it lets you know all of the stuff that you have available in your HeatWave cluster. Here, my HeatWave cluster, I have the Airport DB. I have already preloaded all the tables that I want in my Airport DB. And once I do that, let's see, what else can I do? I can take a look at it here. It tells me the information. I have 15 tables. All of them have been loaded. It says how many rows I have in total. That's quite a bit. And the memory size that I'm using and so on. And it gives me some statistic about memory usage and so on. And that's once you're done with that, you can also go in and check out the performance of your system. And I'm not going to go into it, but you can actually take a look at it when you decide to use HeatWave on AWS. And also, you can also do machine learning, which is one of the things that I will cover next time we meet. But let's go back to the workspace, okay? You see my HeatWave is loaded, everything is ready. So now let's do some query, just like I did with AWS. Here, let me get my cheat sheet. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and say, okay, first thing I wanna do is I wanna know what databases are in here. So I'm gonna say Control V. Run query. Oh, I think I did something wrong, but we're not gonna waste time on it. Let's just say I'm gonna use Airport DB. See if it keeps giving me errors. Let's see. This time it worked. I can use my Airport DB. And you know what? I don't want this, so I just want the screen. Okay, now in my Airport DB, I want to see all the tables that are there. I'm not sure. Let's see. Here, just like we did in AWS, here are all the tables. And again, we're gonna do just like we did in AWS. We're gonna do a select airline. There, run. Came back, no problem. Let's go ahead and try the very hard query that I selected earlier. Did you see that? It came back in 1.5 seconds. Now let's take a quick look at how we're doing in AWS. It still hasn't come back. Anyway, I just gave you a really quick overview of what it is like to work with HeatWave on AWS. Everything is all nicely done and properly set up to make your working in this environment a lot more pleasant. And not only that, everything comes back quickly and it gives you more abilities. You do analytics and machine learning, all that from AWS. You are not in OCI. So now let me go back to my presentation. Let's go back to our HeatWave presentation. Let me move this down here. My demo is over. Let's see. Give me a minute. My demo is over. And by the way, when I was preparing for this workshop, I kind of let the whole thing run. That BigQuery, I let it run on AWS. And here's how long it took. It took 22 minutes to come back with 10 rows of data. Now you see the power of HeatWave on AWS. If you are trying to do a program, give some information to your customer using RDS, I think they'd get frustrated and leave. So let's go ahead. Let me go ahead and finish this presentation. I've talked to you about how important it is for businesses to get their analytic machine learning information really quick. And I also said that they also don't want to spend a lot of money doing it. So what what Oracle did was, instead of them spending a whole lot of money to move their data from AWS to Oracle Cloud Infrastructure and pay that large egress fee, and then also have latency when it comes to running their program, Oracle is a nice guy. Said, I tell you what, I'm moving the whole thing, all of my MySQL HeatWave to AWS. There, your data doesn't have to come out and you don't have to have latency. Same thing for Azure. Azure was a little bit different though, because with Azure, Microsoft and Oracle got together and say, listen, yes, let's let the people who wants to use HeatWave use it. So Oracle created a nice user interface so that Azure people don't have to learn how to use OCI. They can keep doing their work and still get the benefits of using MySQL HeatWave. And here's a good thing. Both Azure and AWS using MySQL HeatWave is a lot faster and the cost is a lot less. So in essence, I hope you had a chance to practically learn something about how Oracle and the multi-cloud are working hard to make businesses have less headaches. And on top of that, I want you to go ahead and put in your questions because I'm ready to answer questions. But listen, if you are interested in using AWS or using Azure with MySQL HeatWave, go ahead, please give Path Infotech a call. They will help you. They are our partner. We teach them how to best work with MySQL HeatWave. So they will guide you and make your work in IT with data processing, analytics, and machine learning a lot easier and a lot more fun. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Perside. Perside, we have a few questions here, if you can share your opinion. Are OCI universal credits?
Hold on, give me a minute. Give me a minute. Let me, how do I stop sharing? Let's stop sharing. Okay, stop sharing my screen. Okay, go ahead.
So the first question is, are OCI universal credits used to pay for MySQL HeatWave on AWS?
No.
Okay. And another question I have here, is there a free trial of MySQL HeatWave on AWS?
Yes, there is. All you have to do is go to the way you normally get your free trial from Oracle. You click in, you go in, you sign on, and you give your information. Once you do that, you can go ahead and click and say, I want to use AWS. Once you do that, then you have to use your credit card, which you already did to sign up. And once your credit card, you get $300 to use AWS as much as you can. Once you run out of those $300, whatever you do on AWS, we start charging.
Okay. And another question, Perside, I have here. Does MySQL HeatWave on AWS mean that there's an interconnect between AWS and OCI?
Well, there's really no interconnect. What happens when you create your OCI account in order to use AWS, we really use it for billing and for identification. Everything else that's done on MySQL HeatWave is done inside AWS. There's no interconnect, which means having HeatWave on AWS is like having RDS in AWS. No egress and no latency.
Okay, thank you. With that, we end this webinar. Once again, thank you all to give your precious time for attending this session. I hope this was a useful session for all of you. If you have any question further to Perside, kindly do email me and we will reply back. My email address is ajay.pal@pathinfotech.com. We will share the recording of this webinar with all the participants very soon. Once again, thank you. Thank you for joining.